Everyone, this is Dr. Katherine Kelly, and going to talk to you today about basically bringing sage wisdom to the modern soul. And this is all about my newsletter and my theme for the month for September. There's so much of our ancient wisdom that we don't use. There's so much of our own wisdom that we don't use. And so I want to bring in this whole idea of how much we ignore what we already have right in front of us or things that are appearing before us. And I'm going to explain that in a second, but how we just either dismiss it, ignore it, don't know to look at it. And the whole concept of bringing sage wisdom to the modern soul has to do with what ancient civilizations, what our cultures prior to us, what our generations before us knew, and basically how a lot of that wisdom has gotten sifted out. Now, if you think about ancient civilizations, they actually intentionally passed their wisdom to the next generation so that it would carry down along the line. And so it was ritualistic, it was a rite of passage, there was so much within the way that ancient cultures lived that would pass that wisdom down. What we don't do that in current day. We don't pass down that wisdom. We don't teach basically our offspring to pay attention to signs from spirit. We don't encourage them to pay attention to that soul side of them. And so, as all of you know, I'm all about trying to bring the soul back to life, trying to really resurrect this part of us that has been left behind for so long. And I want to kind of go back and help you understand how much you probably don't pay attention to. So, what about the signs from spirit? So, years ago, I started paying attention to a lot of the things that were happening around me and realizing that there were messages in them. Now, Native cultures, such as Native Americans, used to do this all the time. They used to pay attention to when a hawk showed up, when an eagle would show up, when a buffalo would show up, when something happened in the sky. Native Americans, whether it was North Americans or South Americans, they would pay attention to these things. Cultures over in Europe, same thing. It's like the whole native wisdom was part of the culture. And yet, modernized cultures don't pay attention to these things. They pay attention more to their cell phones than they pay basically to the things that are happening around them. And I guess that makes sense because if you're paying attention to your phone, you're really not paying attention to everything else that is outside of you that could be giving you messages. Most native and ancient societies used to pay attention to the weather, and they would bring in basically what spirit was telling them. Many times, I just think about all the signs from spirit that ancient cultures would bring in. However, they also used their soul. They were very much more connected with their souls and their wisdom. They would listen within to guide for guidance. They would go sit and meditate. They would go sit in situations that they could contemplate what the solution was. They would go on vision quests. They would do all kinds of things that were soul based, internally based, in order to gain and glean the wisdom that would take a person forward. But now we are so based in, quote, modern society that we have left out the biggest part of who we are. And, you know, the more research has become a part of our life, the more data, the more statistics and I'm not saying those aren't important things, but the more that has taken over the world, taking over how we see the world, the less and less we have listened to our soul. Now, do we need research? Absolutely. Do we need it for everything? No, because even a lot of the practitioners that are out there know because they know what they're seeing right in front of them. A lot of the coaches in front of them know what's happening right in front of them. It's kind of like my best example is using the idea of love. How do you know you love something or someone? There's no measure. There's nothing. There's not a blood test. There's nothing to measure. Yes, we can measure oxytocin, which is the bonding chemical, but bonding chemical doesn't necessarily mean that a person is in love. It just means they're bonding and that these hormones are being emitted. So how do we know we love something? We just know. How do we know we have seen something? We just know. One of the things that I bring up for people and helping them understand how to be in their truth, how to listen to their soul, how to be very aligned with who they are, is when trauma has happened to them. So Anybody who is not there in the moment of trauma happening cannot fully experience and cannot fully relate to the person that was there because they didn't experience it. And yet that soul has become imprinted with the experience of their situation, whatever the trauma was. And that soul knows that something traumatic happened. How do you measure that? You don't. You have to rely on that self-report. And so it's the same thing when it comes to trusting your soul, the same thing when you have to get to the point where you are bringing that sage wisdom, whether it's information that's moving forward from generations or that sage wisdom that's coming from within you. How do you make that a priority in your life again? How do you bring that back in order to live your life in a way that is meaningful, is helpful, is successful? And it's so interesting to see how far we've become disconnected from that soul part of us. You know, the soul is the essence of who we are. It's not a religious term as far as I'm concerned. It is the essence within you. And whatever seasons your soul along the way, whatever experience, whatever trauma, whatever it's a whether it's a joy or a harmful or a hurtful kind of thing, your soul knows that that has happened. Your soul has that infused in its essence to the point where that's the only proof you need. The challenge is we have over time been taught over and over and over again to dismiss that and also try to be logical about certain things. Well, there's not a lot of logical stuff that happens when it comes to measuring things about the soul. How can you measure that basically Native Americans would see certain visions? They would see certain kinds of animals, the hawks, the eagles, like I mentioned, and then be able to prove that something, systematically was going to come true. Well, they knew it would. Those cultures knew it would because they saw it happen. Can you set up a research study about this? No, there's no way. So how do we balance? How do we balance the need for research with the need for wisdom? How do we balance that? And I think that is like the billion-dollar question, because if you look across the world for the amount of mistrust individuals have in themselves at this point, and look at the amount of chaos as a result that is happening all over the world, something is absolutely missing. And so it's that sense of tuning into themselves, listening to what is really going on within them that is going to help guide their path. So I talk about soul wisdom all the time. I talk about being in that soul healthy place all the time. And yes, we follow the masses, but we have to start listening to our truth. And I'm very much in belief that if all of us were really listening to our truth, all of us were really aligning with ourselves for what I call radiant living, then we would all come together anyway. But there is so much woundedness out there that is keeping us disconnected from ourselves, keeping us disconnected from our truth and also our ability to connect with other souls on this planet in a meaningful and helpful way, that's a big part of this divide. So my encouragement, my push for people to start listening to that sacred wisdom again is really not only for your own, your own enrichment, your own ability to see and experience the world in a different way, but it's also for us to come together because we are so broken apart. We are so disconnected. And what's really interesting is when someone shares a memory of heartache with someone else, even if they have very different belief systems, that soul to soul connection brings people together. That experience of sharing your soul with someone else oftentimes brings people together if both parties are in the right place to receive and just connect in that place. So it is so important. Again, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir for those of you who listen to my work anyway, but think about how much we dismiss our soul. Think about how much we dismiss our gut reactions or forget to ask our soul's ideas about things in general. It is super, super important, I think, for us to get in that grounded place. And I've said this probably more than a dozen times in the last couple of years on videos that, our soul will be our salvation. And what I mean by that is that once we connect it's to ourselves, it's when we connect with others. It's when we feel connected, when we can get past our wounds, get past our triggers, get past our reactivity, and just be very present with our soul. that's when we connect with others as well. And so, if there are 8.6 billion people on this planet, well, that many people really need to connect in with their souls in order to not only feel healthier themselves, excuse me, but also connect in with the world and create a better space. So that's where I'm trying to go with people, is helping them understand that, again, that wisdom that's passed down the generations that we've forgotten, the information that we get every day, that we could be seeing what's happening around us and putting meaning to it, the fact that we get messages from within all the time. If we can get to that place where we are living in a much more conscious way, we are going to evolve into the people that we're supposed to be and evolve out of the things that are really needing to be shed, that are keeping us disconnected either from ourselves or others. So that's really what this whole month is about for me, is helping you see the many, many ways that we can connect in with our souls, use that wisdom to guide our lives better. And, in the future, I've got some books I want to write about, soul-based living. I've got a workbook I want to write to take people through the year to help people really realize, okay, this is what I can integrate into my world so that I can live more richly, live more soulfully, basically. But we've got to start by at least admitting that we are or are not connecting in with our inner ally. That wisdom is there for us, and we need to learn to use it. So, just a very brief message today to kind of get you kickstarted with this month and get that idea flowing within you, that there is more that we could be doing to use that ancient wisdom, to use that sage wisdom of our souls to take us forward and take us beyond where we are today. That is conscious evolution as far as I'm concerned. So just something to chew on. I hope you have a wonderful day. Sending light and love to all of you. And I will continue this path of bringing the modern soul back up to date with some of that sage wisdom. Have a great day. Bye-bye.